If you want the chance to win up to $500 in Bass Pro Shops gift cards, stay tuned. On April 25th, 1943, German radio announced to the world that the carrier USS Ranger had been sunk in the North Atlantic. The broadcast credited U-404 and its commander, Otto von Bülow, claiming the U-boat had found the carrier after torpedoing several steamers and sent her to the bottom. The message was clear. Even major Allied warships were not beyond German reach. News of the report reached the families of Ranger's crew, but the U.S. Navy had to spend the next day denying the claim, because von Bülow was mistaken. Ranger had not limped away damaged either. She'd not been hit. She was not even there. In the confusion of the submerged attack, HMS Biter, a British escort almost 300 feet smaller, was mistaken for Ranger, because she was already on her way to the next mission. USS Ranger proved the value of bringing the right weapon to the fight, while Medal Hunter gives you an arsenal of your own to master, along with a chance to win a $500 Bass Pro Shops gift card. A free military shooting game for iOS and Android, Medal Hunter lets you tackle the battlefield in 3 very different ways. Track aircraft with anti-air flak, master the trajectory of artillery arcs, or pick off distant targets with sniper precision. The action spans 9 locations drawn from real operations and documented history, including Pearl Harbor, Warsaw, Vietnam, and Afghanistan. Build up your arsenal, upgrade your favorite weapons, expand your haven, and fight your way up the leagues. Right now, there are more than $30,000 in Bass Pro Shops gift cards waiting to be claimed. Your first giveaway spin unlocks at location 2, with additional spins at locations 4, 7, and 9. Copy your player ID, go to mh-challenge.com, and spin the wheel to reveal your prize. Make sure to get Medal Hunter for free today, and use code DARKSEAS to claim your exclusive welcome kit, all before September 13th. We at DARKSEAS are certainly seizing the opportunity, and you should too. Then come back and let us know what you've won. The false victory broadcast showed how strange Ranger's position had become by 1943. In Berlin, her name was valuable enough to turn into a trophy claim. To the U.S. Navy, she was still useful, but only in a very limited kind of fight. Ranger had become a milestone when she was commissioned on June 4, 1934. She was the first American aircraft carrier designed and built from the keel up for that role. She was also the only ship of her class, built under treaty limits, with a top speed of about 29.3 knots, and light protection, including only about a 2-inch side belt and limited deck armor. And yet, the carrier war in the Pacific demanded ships that could keep pace with fast tank forces, launch strikes over long distances, and survive if enemy scouts found them first. Ranger could still carry a large air group, normally around 76 aircraft, but she was not the carrier the Navy wanted in repeated battles against Japanese air power. She needed a mission where she could launch first from a position the enemy did not expect and leave before the reply arrived. Ranger needed a raid. Norway offered just that. Germany had occupied the country since April 1940, and its coast had become a sheltered supply route. German-controlled ships moved troops, fuel, ore, and other cargo through the protected waters between the mainland and the offshore islands. These sheltered passages, known as the leads, allowed German-controlled ships to move under the cover of Norway's coastline. The traffic served ports, airfields, naval bases, coastal garrisons, and the ore route from the north. They also helped ships avoid the open sea, where submarines and long-range aircraft had more room to attack. But the same routes that protected German shipping also confined it. Ships moving through the leads had to follow narrow channels, pass known points, and stay close to the coast, all in waters that intelligence officers could study, map, and predict. That meant Ranger was being sent on a mission where timing and surprise mattered more than armor. Before Ranger could strike Norway, Allied planners had to account for the giant already waiting there, Tirpitz. She was one of Germany's largest warships, more than 50,000 tons fully loaded, armed with 8 15-inch guns, and stationed in Norway to threaten Allied convoys to the Soviet Union. Even in port, Tirpitz forced the Allies to plan around her. If she could move freely, any carrier raid near Norway carried a larger risk. To reduce the threat, on September 22nd, British midget submarines slipped into Tirpitz's anchorage and planted charges beneath her. The explosions damaged the battleship badly enough to keep her out of action for months. With Tirpitz temporarily out of action, planners still needed targets worth exposing Ranger's air group. Allied intelligence was reading German radio traffic, while Norwegian agents inside occupied Norway watched the coast from the ground. Through hidden radio stations, including Crux 3 and Pisces, they reported ship movements, harbor activity, and weather, all significant information the planners needed to pick targets and approach without warning. From the air, the Norwegian coast was a maze of islands, fjords, headlands, and small craft moving close to shore. A wrong turn could send a strike group over empty water. A rushed attack could hit the wrong vessel. To reduce that risk, 2 Norwegian airmen joined Ranger strike groups. They knew the coast, recognized its landmarks, and helped the Americans distinguish civilian traffic from likely German-controlled shipping, moving toward Bodø, the northern Norwegian port area, where Allied intelligence expected German convoy traffic to be moving. On October 2nd, Ranger left Scapa Flow with her escorts and headed north. The British home fleet helped shield the movement, but one early sighting could ruin the timing. If German aircraft or coastal stations spotted the task force before launch, the alarm would reach Norway ahead of Ranger's strike. As Ranger crossed the Arctic Circle, the crew heard the announcement that they had become Blue Noses, the Navy term for sailors who had entered Arctic waters. Below decks, pilots studied maps, target photographs, coastline shapes, and models of the Bodø area. They learned the routes in and the routes out. Some practiced sketching the coastline until they could do so from memory. The attack plan was built around coordination between fighters and bombers. Before dawn on October 4th, Ranger reached her launch position off Vestfjorden without being detected. She was about 100 miles off the Norwegian coast and roughly 140 miles from Bodø, close enough for her aircraft to strike, but far enough offshore to make the Germans search for her if the alarm went out. In the first wave, 20 SBD Dauntless dive bombers lifted into the gray morning, with 8 F4F Wildcats climbing out around them. Each Dauntless carried a pilot and a rear gunner, and their job was to put bombs into ships. After leaving Ranger, the formation dropped low over the Norwegian Sea. The attack plan called for the aircraft to fly at 50 to 100 feet above the water to reduce the chance of early detection. After landfall, they would climb to 1,500 to 2,000 feet for the attack. The pilots aimed first for Myken Lighthouse on the small island of Utøya, about 62 miles southeast of Bodø. Once they found that landmark, the northern attack group turned north toward Bodø. Soon after, the pilots saw small Norwegian vessels in the leads, 3 fishing boats and a passenger vessel. The Norwegian navigator recognized them as friendly and waved the Americans away. Within minutes, the pilots found convoy Trondheim 317 moving through the sheltered route under armed escort. At its center was Schleswig, a German-controlled tanker that Norwegian accounts later connected to fuel intended for the damaged Tirpitz. Nearby was Kerkplein, a Dutch vessel operating under German control, along with a minesweeper. The Wildcats turned the plan into action, dropping low over the convoy and spraying decks and gun positions with 50 caliber fire. Then the Dauntlesses came down through the flak. German gunners opened up as the bombers committed to their dives. Tracers and flak rose from the ships below, but the attack pressed through, and Schleswig took 3 bomb strikes and sustained heavy damage. The attack also struck Kerkplein, another ship in the convoy. From above, she appeared to be part of the same German-controlled convoy and carried no clear prisoner markings. Bombs struck the ship near the stern and set that section on fire. Her rudder was damaged badly enough that she lost steering control. She did not sink, but the attack still had a human cost. Only afterward did the Americans learn that Kerkplein had been carrying 1,551 Soviet prisoners. 14 prisoners did not survive. 29 were seriously wounded, and 9 were listed as missing. The coast was awake. German anti-aircraft fire came from ships and shore positions as the strike pushed toward Bodø. Bombs hit or landed close enough to throw water against hulls. Smoke rose from damaged vessels. The harbor became a tight pocket of gunfire, splashes, burning fuel, an aircraft pulling out low over the water. 8 SBD Dauntless dive bombers came over Bodø to attack the harbor itself. Below them, German-controlled ships that had used the narrow coastal channels for cover were now caught in tight water. Kappguir and Rabat were at anchor. Lutjeholm was deeper inside the harbor. Malaga was closer to shore. As planned, the fighters went in first to suppress the guns before the bombers committed. Their bombs fell into the harbor area. Some struck ships. Others exploded close enough to throw water against hulls and hide targets behind white spray. Malaga was strafed heavily and bombed twice. One bomb hit near her starboard side. Another missed by about 50 feet. The bomb appeared not to have detonated, but Malaga still had to run aground and later needed dry dock work. Kappguir was damaged under the waterline and had to be grounded in the harbor. Rabat was hit by a bomb and sank. German fire built quickly. Once the Dauntless committed to an attack run, the pilot had little freedom to evade until the bombs were released. Lieutenant Clyde A. Tucker's Dauntless was hit during the harbor attack. Explosive shells struck near the base of the right wing and in or near the engine. The aircraft caught fire. It dropped from about 200 feet, nose low in a 30-degree dive, and broke apart on impact with the water. Tucker and his rear gunner, Stephen Backrun, were lost. Another Dauntless, flown by Lieutenant Sumner Davis, was hit in the engine. White smoke streamed from the aircraft as Davis signaled that he was losing oil pressure. He tried to get away from the target area, but the SBD would not make the long flight back to Ranger. About 12 miles west of Bodø, he put it down in the sea, wheels up, flaps open. Davis and his rear gunner, Donald McCarley, got out of the aircraft and into a life raft. The other plane circled overhead and saw both men signaled they were alive, but had to leave them behind. Davis and McCarley reached Norwegian help, but the Germans found them and took both men prisoner. German air defense reports placed the attack between 8:02 a.m. and 8:06 a.m., which meant it only took a few minutes of combat. The second wave was already on its way. South of Bodø, the raid descended further toward the surface. If the harbor attack had been defined by the Dauntless's ability to dive from altitude, the Southern Group's mission was defined by the commitment of a low-level approach. The Southern Group carried 10 TBF Avengers and 6 F4F Wildcats toward the Sandnessjøen area, nearly 100 miles south of Bodø. By then, the Germans knew American aircraft were hitting the coastal route. What they still did not know was which section of the coast would be hit next. Ranger remained hidden offshore, while her strike groups spread the attack along the Norwegian coast. The Avengers were larger and heavier than the Dauntlesses. Each carried 4 500-pound bombs with armor-piercing delay fuses, forcing the crews into low, direct attacks against ships and shore guns. In the narrow waters of the leads, that meant flying straight toward ships that could fire back. There was little room to maneuver, and no time for long radio calls. Ranger's aircraft were still under radio silence, so tactical control had to stay simple. Only command aircraft were allowed to use very high-frequency radio. Everyone else watched for hand and wing signals, including the section leader's wing waggle when he found a target. Near Sandnessjøen, the Southern Group found its first major target, Topeka, a 4,991 gross registered ton Norwegian cargo ship under German control. After the Wildcats went in low and opened fire, 2 Avengers lined up on Topeka and came in at mast height. Their low approach gave the bombers a straight shot, but it also gave the gunners below time to track them. Topeka's guns opened up. Shore batteries joined in from the coast. Still, the Avengers held their line at mast height. Then the bombs hit, and fire spread through the ship. Topeka was forced onto the shore to avoid sinking, and the fire continued spreading after the attack. German guns were tracking the aircraft from ships and shore. An Avenger, piloted by John H. Palmer, burst into flame in front of the formation and began falling toward the water. The Southern Group Commander, Lieutenant Commander David W. Taylor, the skipper of Torpedo Squadron 4, had kept the formation under radio silence. When Palmer's Avenger burst into flame, Taylor broke that silence at once. He called the burning aircraft and ordered the crew to jump. Only one parachute opened. Palmer survived. His two crewmen, Joseph L. Zalem and Reginald H. Miller, did not. Palmer later believed the shell had punched through the rear of the aircraft and into the engine, setting it on fire and likely leaving the men behind him unable to escape. One of the Southern Group pilots, Gerald Thomas, almost did not make it into his Avenger. Seasickness had nearly knocked him off the flight roster, but the squadron needed him. He was sent to Avenger 4T9, Torpedo Squadron 4's 9th aircraft, near the end of the launch lineup. There was no time for a full briefing. Thomas had to copy Ranger's position, speed, wind direction, and return data before takeoff. If he lost the carrier after the attack, the Norwegian Sea would be the only landing field left. When Thomas reached his next target, German guns were already active, and the formation had already lost Palmer's Avenger. The target ahead was identified as MFS 231, an 800 gross ton vessel traveling alone between Toma and Hannese, carrying 40 tons of ammunition. Thomas did not appear to know that as he lined up. From the cockpit, it looked like another vessel in German-controlled coastal traffic. 3 Avengers went after it, but MFS 231 had an anti-aircraft gun forward and another aft. During the strafing, gun crews were seen leaving their weapons and abandoning ship, but fire was still coming up as the Avengers made their runs. Thomas's first attack was rushed and steep. He was too far behind his section leader and feared he would fly into the blast from the leading aircraft's bombs. To close the distance, he rolled the Avenger and pushed down into the dive. He armed his bombs, opened his bomb bay, and fired a short burst from his guns. Then he hit the release. 2 500-pound bombs dropped from the bay and splashed near the bow. Water and blast slammed against the ship, but Thomas still had 2 bombs left. He came around again, now flying about 50 feet above the water. A warning came over the radio. A shore battery was close. Thomas had not seen it. Bullets punched into his wings, but the Avenger kept flying. He lined up anyway and went to full throttle. Tracer fire from the ship reached toward him as he held the aircraft steady. The Avenger was slow over the water, but Thomas stayed on the run. He released again. This time, 1 bomb hit amidships. MFS 231 ran aground during the attack, and Thomas's hit left it burning. Almost at once, Thomas's engine took a direct hit. There was a flash of fire, and smoke filled his cockpit. Oil began spreading across the aircraft. His turret gunner shouted that they were on fire. Thomas pulled back on the stick to gain altitude and ordered the crew to bail out. He opened the cockpit at about 800 feet and started climbing out. Then the turret gunner shouted for him not to jump. The third crewman had accidentally pulled his ripcord inside the aircraft. His parachute opened inside the Avenger, trapping him and blocking the escape hatch. The bailout failed inside the Avenger before anyone reached open air. Thomas could no longer leave the aircraft, so 4T9 had to stay airborne. He had the return data on his plotting board, but the numbers did not guarantee that Ranger would be found. She had kept moving while the strike was underway. There was still one possible escape route. He could turn toward neutral Sweden. Ranger was about 100 miles away, and Sweden was about 90. More importantly, Thomas knew exactly where Sweden was. If he reached Swedish territory, he and his crew would likely be interned. If he ditched in the North Atlantic, the crew might survive only 15 to 20 minutes in the cold water. So Thomas climbed 5,000 feet and headed toward Sweden. As he turned toward Sweden, he saw Avengers ahead of him, heading the other way. They were going back to Ranger. Using his plotting board, Thomas calculated the heading, turned with them, and followed the returning aircraft toward the carrier. Everything depended on the engine. It was still turning, but losing oil with every mile over the Norwegian Sea. Finally, the carrier came into sight. A carrier landing would have proved hard enough in an undamaged aircraft. Thomas had to bring a wounded Avenger over Ranger's stern, catch an arresting wire with the tail hook, and stop on a short moving deck while oil covered the windscreen. When 4T9 reached Ranger, the landing signal officer waved him off. From the deck, Thomas's approach did not look safe enough to accept. Normally, that meant adding power and coming around again. Thomas could not risk it. Another circle could put the Avenger in the water with the crew still aboard. Thomas came over Ranger at an angle too sharp to land, crossed the flight deck, and turned back for one more try. On the next pass, he could not see the landing signal officer, so he used Ranger's island to line himself up with the deck. The Avenger dropped onto Ranger's flight deck. The tailhook caught a wire just as the aircraft hit the crash barrier. The wing clipped the island. The deck crew sprayed the aircraft down, and all 3 men got out alive. 4T9 would never fly again, but it had stopped on Ranger instead of in the Norwegian Sea. More damaged aircraft followed Thomas aboard. One collapsed its landing gear on landing. Others returned with damage to the wing rudder, stabilizer, engine, and control cables from German anti-aircraft fire. The deck crews could not let the landing area stay blocked. They had to drag the wrecked aircraft clear, reset the barrier, and open the deck again before the next plane came down. Overhead, other pilots were still circling, burning fuel, waiting for a deck that had to be cleared in minutes. Ranger had her surviving aircraft back, but Norway was not finished with her yet. Deck crews were still clearing damaged planes. Missing crews were being counted, and the task force was still within reach of a German response. The Germans now knew a carrier was offshore. They still had to find her. By early afternoon, the strike groups had been recovered or counted missing. Off Norway, the task force was already turning away from the coast. German gunners had seen the aircraft and reported the attacks, but none of that gave them Ranger's position. Around 2 p.m., German reconnaissance aircraft neared the force. 3 scouts came toward Ranger as she sailed west with the home fleet. Ranger had 2 pairs of F4F Wildcats up on combat air patrol, already airborne to protect the carrier. The Wildcats caught the first scout, a Ju-88, about 22 miles from Ranger, and shot it down before it could shadow the fleet. Immediately afterward, a Henkel HE-115 float plane appeared. The Wildcats attacked again and kept firing until it crashed into the sea about 13 miles from Ranger. Those 2 interceptions kept the German reconnaissance effort from turning into a steady shadow. Soon after, one Wildcat returning from the interception missed the landing and went overboard. The pilot survived and was picked up unharmed by HMS Scourge, one of the British destroyers screening the force. Behind her, the German reporting system was still catching up. Coastal warnings and delayed communications moved through after Ranger's aircraft had already crossed back out over the water. German command eventually received word of 17 warships and a carrier, but by then, the raid had already done its damage, and the force was pulling away. Along the coast, the results were visible in the narrow waters the Germans had trusted. Ships were burning, aground, sunk, or unable to move. Ranger returned to Scapa Flow with the home fleet. When Ranger entered the anchorage on October 8th, the fleet's commander, Admiral Sir Bruce Fraser, signaled the ships in the flow to give a special cheer for the, quote, Norway raiders, and issued a, quote, well done. She had finally found the kind of operation she had unknowingly been built for. Thank you to Medal Hunter for supporting today's video. Get the game for free. Claim your welcome kit with code DARKSEAS. And head to mh-challenge.com to enter the $30,000 Bass Pro Shops giveaway before September 13th.